Welcome to my channel, where we discuss such fringe topics as Joseph Smith and Brigham Young's polygamy. If you appreciate my work, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. I've noticed lately that there is more open discussion on whether or not Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. We are now called polygamy skeptics. I think that's a step above what they used to call us, which was delusional. But let's begin again. Not that I think polygamy is the most essential message of Joseph Smith, since his legacy is much greater than this, but this is essential to the Brighamite church. So I guess we have to address it over and over and over again. The reason why you will not convince faithful Utah Mormons that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy, because polygamy is structural in the Utah Mormon Church. They cannot separate the two because it is a religion based on the ritual of polygamy. That is harem polygamy. So we as women, or as genuine historians seeking the truth about Joseph Smith's stated rejection of harem polygamy, will never convince those who are so invested into the structural religion based solely on polygamy. This is their investment, and they're not going to give it up easily. No matter what the evidence suggests, they will always claim that their reputed prophet, Joseph Smith, that is how popular Joseph Smith was, is that they Utah Brighamite Mormons have to cling to a fictional memory of Joseph Smith and his fictional history of polygamy to justify its continued legitimacy. Why do I say this? If you're a divorced woman with children at BYU, these secret polygamists come out of the woodwork and prey upon you, telling you it's Joseph Smith's religion, and to do it in secret is the highest principle. And yes, I have personal knowledge even of some of these Sunstone scholars being promoters of this secret practice of polygamy at BYU. So let's be realistic. You will never convince Mormons whose organization is based on the secret practice of polygamy. You will never convince them that their fictionalized, mythical Joseph Smith is promoting it and blessing them from heaven. Number one, Joseph Smith not only functioned as their straw man for promoting polygamy, but also he functions as that mythical martyr that is required by these very strange occult organizations. They always need the blood of a martyr to start their personal claim to legitimacy and to God's blessing and word. So don't let the Sunstone scholars fool you. Sunstone was started by Dallin Oaks, Mr. Legalized Polygamy himself. These Sunstone scholars are shills. They're complete shills and phonies, and they're acting as if they're liberal, progressive scholars, but they're nothing but phony, baloney, polygamy shills. So let's be realistic. You will never convince Mormons whose organization is based on the secret practice of polygamy. You will never convince them that their fictionalized, mythical Joseph Smith is promoting it and blessing them from heaven. I will speculate to say that most divorced women with children get a hit up 2 or 3 times by high-ranking Mormon officials who are secretly practicing polygamy. I have conferred with different women, and it appears that stake president and above, they are given the green light to practice polygamy in the Utah Mormon Church as long as they don't tell their wives, and they are told that if their wives find out, they will be excommunicated, but then brought quickly within the church. I have heard this from other women. You will never tell a secret organization practicing polygamy in secret that their venerated fictional Joseph Smith did not promote polygamy. But I will continue to address the flawed and speculative history that are promoted by basically men practicing polygamy in secret. And when you do anything in secret, you have to keep the secrets through structural lying. And the Utah Mormon Church is a religion. That lying is structural. It is essential that the Mormon priesthood gather together and lie, not only to their women and children, but lie to the general public. I have reason to suspect that many of my who were high-ranking bishops and stake presidents above were practicing secret polygamy with households in different states. In fact, one was caught, and yet he was only disfellowshipped. He wasn't excommunicated. And there is a wink and a nod between these brethren of bishop and above about the secret, illegitimate practice of polygamy. I have overheard the priesthood in my own family wink and nod and go into their own little discussions, claiming that polygamy will be restored in public. And we know that Dallin Oaks has waged a campaign about restoring polygamy to be practiced in the town square publicly. In other words, to legitimize harem polygamy and a primitive tradition based on slave trading and sex trafficking of women. This is where it originated from. It originated out of war and excess women, which those that prevailed in war could use the women as sex trafficking slaves. That's where it comes from. And you are not going to convince these Mormons in Utah who are practicing polygamy in secret of anything to the contrary, because they would have to admit they are doing evil. They are lying. They are nothing but dirty, filthy liars who have completely betrayed their women and their children and have left the legacy of complete ashes. And as seen in the prepper community of Mormons in Idaho, blood atonement, which has ended up in not only wife swapping, as reported by many whistleblowers, but in children being murdered and buried after some ritualized dismemberment. This, while the LDS Mormon Utah Church promotes harem polygamy as some lofty celestial principle, they strategically fail to mention the strange sexual practices connected with the practice of harem polygamy. Let's begin in the beginning with John D. Lee's history of how he and Brigham Young practiced early Mormon harem polygamy in Nauvoo. John D. Lee reports that there was no traditional marriage per se during the Brigham Young harem polygamy days. Basically, you invited a young lady into your household, tried her out for size, like a car, and then if your first or second wife approved or the household approved, then you would request from Brigham Young for this young lass to be sealed to you. That means that they were practicing in Nauvoo open marriage without any civil or religious ritual until the household was approved and the woman was approved for sealing by Brigham Young. Further, John D. Lee states, rather slyly, that occasionally the first wife would participate in the marriage night with the second wife. This tradition of threesomes among husband and two wives was caught on audio tape in the Warren Jeffs trial, which introduced into evidence an audio tape of a young girl being coaxed along by an older polygamous wife to have intercourse with Warren Jeffs on her first night. Then also, John D. Lee reports that before there was this wholesale sealing organization going on in Nauvoo, that the men were free to swap wives. In fact, John D. Lee and Brigham Young swapped certain women. One woman was pledged to John D. Lee, but Brigham Young had a fancy for her and asked that John D. Lee give her up, which he did. Later on, after Brigham Young tired of this young woman, she asked to go back to John D. Lee and remarry him, but Brigham Young disapproved. John D. Lee, with all his flaws, certainly seems to be a warm-hearted, sorry, sad, tragic anti-hero who legitimately loved all of his polygamous wives. But something not so conventional today is that he would raise some of his wives' sisters, young sisters, and then eventually marry these sisters also. In other words, he'd raise little girls from the time they were children, and once they became old enough, he would quote unquote marry them or have sex with them. A completely confusing, inhuman tradition, which is practiced today in fundamentalist Mormon communities. It is so against human nature and the legitimate role that a man should be playing as father to and protector to his children, not father and exploiter of his children. Another very disgusting ritual, which has been reported by these young polygamous girls as they try and escape their bondage of polygamy, is that these old white women basically are lazy lovers. They'll sit in an easy chair, lay back, and then these young girls come in and give them sex, or service them, as it is called in the business. All right? This is why the guy, such as Jeffrey Epstein, this is what they do in the higher elite circles too. They're just very lazy lovers. They like just to be serviced by women. And then according to the history of, I believe, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, he then gives these models that would come in and service him after lunch. He would give them bits of jewelry in other words, not as crass as giving them money as you would prostitutes. But this is what Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew are also reputed to have done. You just lay back, have a massage, and have them perform sex. And this is done all the time in massage parlors. It's called the happy ending. All right. Lazy, lazy men who just would rather be serviced. Lazy, lazy men who just cannot perform legitimately because they have really no need for women. They only need women to give them self-respect in the public world. But basically, these are very immature, insecure men who cannot hold a legitimate sexual relationship with one woman, but must jump from bed to bed. No, excuse me, from massage table to massage table, from easy chair to easy chair, to have various women come in and out like a circus carousel at Disneyland to give them sexual pleasure and then pay the women to please leave. Also, harem polygamy is so antithetical to human nature, is supported by the fact that it has never flourished outside of extreme threats of violence. There were many communities during the 19th century that tried to practice these unconventional forms of marriage. All of them went the wayside, except for Brigham Young's harem polygamy, that when he got them, the Mormons, out isolated in a Western territory, then he practiced terrorism under threat of murder and violence if any of the men disclosed or if any of the women disclosed that practice of polygamy. With its cruelty, its slavery, its violence required to continue it. Several of Brigham Young's legitimate wives who left him had to go into hiding under threat of being hunted down and murdered by the avenging angels of Brigham Young.